First story, Zanfretta's Case, 1978, Italy. The year is 1978. Italy, usually vibrant and sun-drenched, is draped in the cool, melancholic hues of late autumn. Liguria, a coastal region known for its picturesque villages and rugged terrain, becomes the stage for an uncanny tale. Here, nestled amidst rolling hills and shadowed villas, we meet Nicola Zanfretta, an ordinary night watchman. His world is one of routine patrols, the quiet rustle of leaves underfoot, and the distant hum of civilization. A predictable existence in a world still grappling with the echoes of a turbulent decade. Zanfretta, a man grounded in the tangible realities of his everyday life, finds solace in the solitude of the night shift. He is a figure of quiet resilience, his days spent in the normalcy of family and community, his nights entrusted to the guardianship of Villa Zanfretta, a grand estate steeped in local history and whispers of unexplained events. He is not a seeker of the extraordinary, but rather a man content in the familiar rhythm of his duties, unaware that the veil of his predictable world is about to be violently torn aside. The tranquility of Zanfretta's routine is about to be shattered by an intrusion from the cosmos. An inexplicable unease begins to permeate the crisp night air, a subtle dissonance in the usual symphony of nocturnal sounds. The familiar comfort of his nightly rounds slowly morphs into a chilling premonition, an instinctual awareness that something profound and terrifying is about to disrupt the very fabric of his reality. Unbeknownst to him, the silent expanse above is not empty, and the shadows that dance around the villa are not merely cast by earthly forms. This is not just a story of lights in the sky, but a deeply personal descent into fear, a raw and emotional exploration of the unknown that tears at the seams of human understanding. It is Zanfretta's intimate account, a harrowing testament to a night that forever altered his perception of reality, leaving him grappling with a truth too incredible, too terrifying, to easily share, a truth that lurks in the shadows, waiting to resurface. Liguria in 1978 was a land steeped in tradition, where the ancient rhythm of the Mediterranean Sea dictated the pace of life. Small towns clung to the hillsides, their terracotta roofs warming under the Italian sun, while the shadow of ancient villas stretched long across the valleys as dusk approached. It was in this world, a blend of rustic charm and quiet modernity, that Nicola Zanfretta lived a life of comforting predictability. He was a man tethered to routine, a steadfast presence in his community, known for his quiet demeanor and unwavering reliability. Zanfretta wasn't a man of grand ambitions or extraordinary dreams. His world revolved around his family, his modest home, and the steady rhythm of his work as a night watchman. He found a quiet satisfaction in the solitude of the night, the sense of responsibility he carried for the sprawling Villa Zanfretta, a historical landmark entrusted to his care. His motivations were simple: to provide for his loved ones, to maintain the peaceful order of his existence, and to uphold the values of diligence and dependability instilled in him from a young age. Villa Zanfretta itself was more than just a building. It was a silent witness to generations past. Its aged stone walls held secrets and whispers of history, contributing to the region's mystique and adding a layer of subtle unease to the night watchman's duty. Local folklore intertwined with the villa's history, tales of unusual occurrences and unexplained phenomena adding to the atmosphere of the Ligurian countryside. This backdrop of established history and local mystique served as the canvas upon which Zanfretta's ordinary life was about to be painted with strokes of the utterly extraordinary. Unbeknownst to Nicola, his grounded existence was on the cusp of being irrevocably altered. His initial motivation, the simple desire for a peaceful night of routine patrol, was about to collide with forces beyond human comprehension. He was a man content in his known world, unaware that the quiet darkness surrounding Villa Zanfretta held something that would shatter his understanding of reality and plunge him into a personal nightmare that would resonate through the rest of his days. The searing light descended again, no longer a mystery, but a deliberate focus: Zanfretta. The villa's aged stones, witnesses to centuries, now revealed their secret. Not mere shadows, but a veil concealing a terrifying cosmic gateway inexplicably opened, and he was the key. Zanfreda's immediate goal, thrust upon him by the searing light and alien presence, became stark, survival, and then understanding. Disoriented and shaken upon his return to Villa Zanfreda, his mind churned with fragmented images, cold metal, piercing yellow eyes, whispered questions. The initial obstacle was the bewildering lack of concrete memory, a terrifying jigsaw puzzle of sensory impressions and lost time. He yearned to piece together the night's events, to grasp the reality of what had transpired, a desperate need to reclaim his stolen experience and understand the impossible. Fueled by a gnawing unease and the chilling echo of alien words, Zanfreda sought answers. His primary goal shifted from simple comprehension to a more urgent need for verification and external validation. He decided to confide in the local authorities, hoping for acknowledgement, for assistance in understanding the inexplicable. However, he soon encountered his first significant human obstacle, disbelief. Met with skepticism and thinly veiled condescension, Zanfreda realized that the tangible world around him was resistant, perhaps even hostile, to his impossible truth. This rejection forced Zanfreda inwards, intensifying his isolation. His relationship with the familiar world began to fray, a growing chasm forming between his internal reality and external perception. The dynamic shifted from Zanfreda against the unknown aliens to Zanfreda against the disbelief of his own community. This isolation became a subplot in itself, exploring the profound loneliness of experiencing something extraordinary and terrifying that no one else could comprehend or accept. His initial goal of external validation morphed into a desperate fight to maintain his own sanity in the face of widespread doubt. Another subplot emerged from the lingering promise, "We will return." This chilling statement became an ever-present shadow, fueling a constant state of anxiety and fear. Zanfreda's goal was no longer just understanding the past, but bracing for an uncertain future, living under the weight of a cosmic threat. The promise served as a constant reminder of his vulnerability, of his role as something observed, studied, and potentially revisited by forces beyond his control, transforming his once peaceful life into a tense vigil. The inciting incident arrived not with a bang, but with an impossible light. One moment, Nicola Zanfreda was conducting his routine patrol of Villa Zanfreda. The next, an otherworldly luminescence pierced the Ligurian night, bathing the familiar landscape in an unsettling, alien glow. This was no ordinary atmospheric phenomenon. It was a deliberate, focused intrusion, shattering the predictable rhythm of his night and thrusting him into the realm of the inexplicable. The light was the harbinger, the catalyst that irrevocably altered the course of Zanfreda's life. The light was followed by form, monstrous and terrifying. Reptilian figures materialized from the ethereal glow, their piercing yellow eyes fixated on Zanfreda, their presence radiating an unnerving intelligence and alien intent. In that instant, the familiar rules of reality dissolved. Zanfreda's control over his own body, his own destiny, was violently wrested away. He became a passive subject in a terrifying drama not of his making, his free will overridden by forces utterly beyond his comprehension or resistance. This encounter was not just a visual shock, it was a profound violation of his physical and mental autonomy. The abduction itself, the forced descent into the alien craft, was a dizzying plunge into the unknown. Stripped of his earthly context, surrounded by cold, sterile technology and these grotesque beings, Zanfreda became acutely aware of his vulnerability, his insignificance in the face of cosmic forces. The examinations that followed were clinical, invasive, a dehumanizing experience that further cemented the reality of his abduction and the utter alienness of his captors. This forced interaction was a jarring disruption of his life, a traumatic event that shattered his sense of security and normalcy. Returned to the familiar gravel path outside Villa Zanfreda as abruptly as he was taken, Zanfreda was no longer the same man. The world around him appeared unchanged, yet he carried within him the indelible imprint of the alien encounter. The chilling promise, "We will return," echoed in his mind, a constant, menacing reminder of the unfinished nature of this cosmic intrusion. This promise was the ultimate inciting incident consequence, a perpetual state of fear and anticipation, transforming his once peaceful existence into a long, agonizing wait for an inevitable and terrifying second act. Driven by the trauma of abduction and the ominous promise, Zanfreda's motivation became clear. He had to understand. He needed to make sense of the impossible event that had shattered his reality, not just for his own sanity, but perhaps for survival. The inciting incident had stripped him of his peace, his predictability, and his control, leaving him with an urgent, desperate need to reclaim some semblance of understanding in a world suddenly revealed to be far more terrifying and complex than he had ever imagined. The immediate consequence of the abduction was a profound fracturing of Zanfreda's reality. Returned to his familiar world, he found himself adrift in a sea of fragmented memories, haunted by visceral sensory impressions. The cold, sterile touch of alien technology, the piercing intensity of yellow eyes, the disembodied voices in his mind. The once comforting routine of his night watchman duties now felt alien, his perception of the world irrevocably tainted by the impossible encounter. He was no longer just Nicola Zanfreda, the night watchman. He was Nicola Zanfreda, the abductee, carrying a truth that threatened to unravel his sanity. A new, daunting challenge emerged, navigating a world that refused to acknowledge his reality. When Zanfreda hesitantly sought help from local authorities, hoping for understanding or at least acknowledgement, he was met with polite skepticism and thinly veiled ridicule. This disbelief, instead of offering comfort, intensified his isolation, creating a profound chasm between his internal experience and the external world. The very people entrusted to protect and serve him dismissed his terror as delusion, further solidifying his feeling of being utterly alone with his impossible truth. Zanfreda's motivations shifted from simple understanding to a desperate need for validation and a quest to alleviate his growing psychological distress. He yearned to find someone, anyone, who would believe his account, who could offer a shred of support in the face of overwhelming disbelief. This desperation fueled a new internal drive to prove the reality of his experience, not just to others, but perhaps more importantly to himself, to prevent his sanity from succumbing to the weight of the unbelievable. A new character entered Zanfreda's narrative, Dr. Lorenzi, a local physician initially contacted for Zanfreda's growing insomnia and anxiety. Dr. Lorenzi, a man of science and reason, represented the prevalent skepticism, initially attributing Zanfreda's distress to stress and trauma. However, noticing the genuine terror in Zanfreda's account and the consistency of his fragmented recollections, a seed of doubt, and then curiosity, began to sprout in the doctor's mind. This nascent relationship offered a potential lifeline, a possibility of breaking through the wall of disbelief and finding an ally in his struggle. The setting itself began to subtly shift in Zanfreda's perception. Villa Zanfreda, once a familiar, if somewhat imposing landmark, now became a locus of fear, the silent witness to his violation, forever associated with the terrifying encounter. The Ligurian night, once a source of quiet solitude, now pulsed with potential menace, every shadow holding the thread of a returning light, every silence pregnant with unspoken dread. His familiar world was no longer safe, no longer comforting. It was now a stage for a terrifying, ongoing drama. A critical subplot emerged from Dr. Lorenzi's growing interest, the exploration of hypnosis. Driven by a desire to help Zanfreda alleviate his distress, and perhaps by his own burgeoning scientific curiosity, Dr. Lorenzi suggested hypnotic regression as a potential tool to unlock Zanfreda's fragmented memories. This proposition introduced a new layer of complexity, opening the door to deeper revelations and potentially more terrifying confirmations of the alien abduction, setting the stage for the next phase of Zanfreda's harrowing journey. The decision to undergo hypnosis marked a critical escalation. Zanfreda, driven by a desperate need for answers, willingly plunged into the depths of his subconscious, a move that promised clarity but threatened to unleash even more terrifying truths. This choice heightened the stakes, transforming his internal struggle into an active confrontation with the unknown, a deliberate step deeper into the abyss of his abduction experience. The uncertainty surrounding what hypnosis might reveal added a layer of suspense, a sense of impending revelation that could either confirm his fears or shatter them completely. The subplot of seeking validation deepened dramatically as hypnosis sessions began to unlock fragmented memories. Details emerged: clinical examinations, emotionless questions, the chilling promise of return, painting a horrifyingly coherent picture of alien abduction. These revelations, while providing a semblance of clarity, paradoxically intensified Zanfreda's isolation. The more he remembered, the more unbelievable his story became to the outside world, further solidifying his position as an outcast burdened by an impossible truth. The psychological impact on Zanfreda intensified, the vivid recall of the traumatic events reopening wounds and amplifying his fear and anxiety. Tension between Zanfreda and Dr. Lorenzi subtly shifted. Initially skeptical, Dr. Lorenzi found himself increasingly confronted by the consistency and visceral terror revealed during hypnosis. His scientific rationality clashed with the undeniable emotional distress and the increasingly detailed, albeit fantastical, narrative emerging from Zanfreda's subconscious. The doctor's internal conflict, between his medical training and the unsettling evidence, created a palpable tension, a question of whether he would ultimately dismiss Zanfreda as delusional or confront the possibility of the impossible. The chilling promise, "We will return," became a central point of escalating tension. Hypnosis not only confirmed the abduction, but also solidified the alien intent to reappear. This shifted the focus from past trauma to a looming future threat, transforming Zanfreda's existence into a constant state of anxious anticipation. Every unexplained noise, every fleeting light in the sky, became a potential harbinger of their return, amplifying his fear and creating a pervasive sense of vulnerability. The stakes were no longer just about understanding the past, but about surviving an uncertain and potentially terrifying future. The external world's unwavering disbelief further tightened the narrative noose around Zanfreda. As hypnosis seemingly validated his account, the more vehemently the authorities and his community dismissed it, creating an unbearable pressure. This external resistance fueled Zanfreda's internal turmoil, intensifying his feelings of isolation and questioning his own sanity. The intertwined subplots of validation and psychological deterioration reached a critical point, pushing Zanfreda towards a breaking point. Trapped between the horrifying reality of his abduction and the crushing disbelief of everyone around him, hypnosis became the pivotal turning point, a double-edged sword in Zanfreda's desperate quest for truth. While the sessions unearthed vivid, terrifyingly consistent memories, offering internal validation of his abduction, they simultaneously deepened his isolation from the external world. Each recalled detail, each whispered question from the alien beings, solidified the unbelievable reality for Zanfreda, yet further cemented his image in the eyes of others as delusional or unstable. This internal confirmation, paradoxically, amplified his external struggle, pushing him closer to a breaking point, trapped between his undeniable experience and the world's resolute denial. Dr. Lorenzi's transformation mirrored this turning point. Initially a skeptic, the doctor found himself increasingly unsettled by the raw terror and unwavering consistency revealed under hypnosis. His scientific skepticism began to erode, replaced by a reluctant acknowledgement of the impossible, or at least a profound concern for Zanfreda's genuine psychological torment. This shift in Dr. Lorenzi offered a fragile lifeline, a potential ally in Zanfreda's lonely battle. However, even this nascent support couldn't fully alleviate the crushing weight of isolation and the looming dread of the promised return. Zanfreda, hardened by disbelief yet weakened by fear, braced himself, unknowingly approaching the precipice of his ultimate confrontation with the unknown. A subtle shift began to permeate Zanfreda's life, a quiet unease that transcended his usual anxiety. The Ligurian nights, once merely silent, now seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible energy, a vibration in the air that resonated with the deepest fibers of his being. Flickering lights in the distance, previously dismissed as car headlights or distant aircraft, now held a different weight, a chilling possibility of otherworldly origin that sent icy tendrils of fear through his veins. These subtle environmental changes acted as foreshadowing, whispering of an approaching storm, the promised return drawing nearer. Dr. Lorenzi, now firmly convinced of Zanfretta's genuine distress, though perhaps still hesitant to fully embrace the alien abduction narrative, solidified his role as Zanfretta's sole confidant and ally. He transitioned from a skeptical physician to a concerned advocate, his medical curiosity now intertwined with a growing sense of responsibility for Zanfretta's well-being. This alliance, born from initial disbelief, offered Zanfretta a crucial anchor in the storm of skepticism, a fragile beacon of understanding in his isolating ordeal. While the world remained unconvinced, Dr. Lorenzi's support became a minor resolution in Zanfretta's desperate quest for validation, a small victory against the overwhelming tide of disbelief. Zanfretta himself, hardened by constant rejection and haunted by vivid memories, reached a point of grim acceptance. He no longer sought external validation with the same fervent desperation. The hypnosis sessions had, in a perverse way, provided a form of resolution, an internal confirmation of his truth, however terrifying. He understood, on a visceral level, what had happened to him, even if the world refused to acknowledge it. This internal resolution, however, was not peace, but a grim preparation, a steeling of himself for the inevitable. A minor confrontation arose with the local authorities, a final, futile attempt by Zanfretta and Dr. Lorenzi to present the accumulating evidence. The consistent hypnosis recollections, Zanfretta's deteriorating health, the persistent strange occurrences around Villa Zanfretta. This attempt was met with even stronger resistance, outright dismissal, and thinly veiled threats of institutionalization for Zanfretta. This solidified the external world's opposition, effectively closing off any avenue for official help and isolating Zanfretta further, but also resolving the subplot of seeking external validation, definitively proving its futility. As if in response to this final rejection, or perhaps simply in accordance with their chilling promise, the subtle foreshadowing intensified. The humming in the night air grew louder, the distant lights became brighter, more deliberate, no longer easily dismissed. Zanfretta began experiencing vivid, waking visions, fragmented images of the alien craft, the reptilian figures, the cold examinations, as if his mind was being prepped, scanned, anticipated. These increasingly intense premonitions served as a clear sign. The stage was set, the climax was imminent. The return was not just a promise anymore, it was an approaching certainty. The final patrols at Villa Zanfretta became a torment of heightened senses. Every rustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps, every shadow seemed to writhe with unseen forms. Zanfretta's sleep was non-existent, replaced by waking nightmares that bled into his reality, blurring the lines between memory and premonition. The oppressive silence of the night amplified his internal terror, the very air seeming to vibrate with an unseen presence, a palpable anticipation of the promised return. His final challenge was not physical, but mental, a desperate struggle to maintain his sanity in the face of overwhelming dread and the certainty of another encounter. The unwavering disbelief of the community hardened into a final, impenetrable wall. Whispers followed Zanfretta in the village, turning to open mockery and ostracization. Even well-meaning acquaintances distanced themselves, fear of association outweighing any lingering sympathy. This complete social isolation became a crushing emotional burden, stripping away his last vestiges of normalcy, leaving him utterly alone to face the approaching unknown. The stakes were no longer just his sanity or his life, but his very identity, his place in the human world, threatened by the cosmic horror he carried within him. Dr. Lorenzi, now a steadfast ally, became Zanfretta's final anchor in reality. Witnessing Zanfretta's escalating distress and the undeniable signs, he abandoned any remaining skepticism, fully embracing the unbelievable truth. He offered not just medical support, but unwavering companionship, a shared burden in the face of overwhelming isolation. This unlikely alliance, forged in disbelief and solidified by shared terror, became the last fragile thread of hope for Zanfretta, a testament to human connection against cosmic indifference. The narrative threads of isolation, fear, and fragile hope converged, all leading inexorably towards the impending climax, the terrifying fulfillment of the alien promise, ready to erupt into a final, devastating confrontation. The Ligurian night shattered once more, not with a gentle glow, but with a blinding, searing light that ripped through the darkness, accompanied by a high-pitched hum that vibrated deep within Zanfretta's bones. They were back. The reptilian figures materialized from the light, taller, more imposing than before, their yellow eyes burning with an unnerving intensity that seemed to pierce his very soul. This was not a probing examination. It was a return, a fulfillment of their chilling promise, a final confrontation with the impossible reality that had consumed his life. Frozen by terror, yet strangely resigned, Zanfretta faced them. Gone was the frantic fear of the first encounter, replaced by a chilling acceptance, a weary surrender to the inevitable. He met their gaze, those piercing yellow eyes, not with panic, but with a stark, quiet defiance. He was broken, isolated, disbelieved, but he was not defeated. He had endured, he had remembered, he had faced his terror, and in that moment, amidst the alien light and the looming figures, he found a strange, desolate strength. The climax was not a battle, but a stark, silent understanding. The aliens approached, not with questions, but with a gesture, a touch that conveyed not cold examination, but something else. Recognition? Acknowledgement? It was fleeting, ambiguous, yet undeniably present. Then, as abruptly as they arrived, they were gone. The light vanished, the humming ceased, leaving only the oppressive silence of the Ligurian night, heavier now, imbued with the weight of undeniable truth. Zanfretta remained, standing on the gravel path, forever changed, forever marked, but finally understood. Dr. Lorenzi, watching from the villa's darkened windows, witnessed it all. His skepticism finally shattered, replaced by a chilling certainty. He became the silent witness, the reluctant believer, forever bound to Zanfretta's extraordinary tale. The subplot of disbelief resolved, not with acceptance, but with the stark, undeniable reality of the impossible. The thematic closure was bleak, unsettling. The universe vast, indifferent, and terrifyingly unknown. Zanfretta's story serves as a chilling reminder. Some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed. This is Zanfretta's story, a testament to the enduring power of fear, the crushing weight of disbelief, and the terrifying possibility that we are not alone. If you dare to delve deeper into the unexplained, if you've ever felt a prickle of unease in the silence of the night sky, then share this story. Let Zanfretta's experience resonate, and consider, what if the unbelievable is not only real, but waiting to return? Zanfretta continued his life in the Ligurian landscape, forever altered. The Villa Zanfretta nights remained silent, outwardly unchanged, yet for him, they pulsed with a hidden history, a secret layer of reality unseen by others. He carried the weight of his truth, the indelible memory of piercing yellow eyes and a chilling promise, a solitary figure marked by an encounter that defied earthly explanation. His fate was not one of heroic triumph or tragic demise, but a quiet endurance, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to survive the unimaginable, even when shrouded in disbelief and isolation. Dr. Lorenzi, forever bound to Zanfretta's narrative, became a keeper of the secret, a reluctant guardian of an impossible truth. He witnessed firsthand the profound impact of the unexplained, his scientific worldview irrevocably broadened, or perhaps fractured. He remained in quiet contact with Zanfretta, a silent pact forged in shared experience, a testament to the power of human connection in the face of the extraordinary. Their fates intertwined, a doctor and his patient, linked by a shared brush with a reality that science could not yet, or perhaps would never, fully comprehend. Zanfretta's story, ultimately, is not about spaceships and aliens, but about the fragility of our perceived reality, and the courage it takes to confront the unknown, even when met with ridicule and disbelief. It whispers a poignant moral. The universe is vast, our understanding limited, And perhaps the greatest horrors are not found in the stars, but in the closed minds and disbelieving hearts of those around us. The subtle hint lingers. Zanfreda's experience might be singular, or it might be a harbinger, a chilling prelude to a larger, unfolding cosmic narrative. Share this story and ask yourself, are we truly alone, and are we brave enough to believe the unbelievable? Second story, Kelly Cahill's abduction case, 1993, Australia. The vast, ancient silence of the Australian outback held a different kind of darkness in 1993. It wasn't just the absence of light, but a heavy, expectant stillness that pressed down on the land, the kind of quiet that makes the rustle of leaves sound like whispered secrets. For me, Kelly Cahill, that night started like any other late drive home, the familiar highway stretching out before me, promising the comfort of my own bed after a long day. The stars, usually a comforting blanket above, seemed sharper, colder, almost accusatory that evening. I remember the radio fading in and out, static crackling like unseen energy in the air, and a growing unease that tightened in my chest. It was more than just the loneliness of the road. It was a sense of being watched, an instinctive prickle of fear that raised the hairs on my arms. Dismissing it as fatigue, I pressed on, the headlights cutting through the black, each mile deepening the isolation, each shadow seeming to writhe with unseen possibilities. Then it appeared, not gradually but abruptly, impossibly, hanging in the sky like a tear in the fabric of reality. A craft, unlike anything conceived on Earth, silent, dark, yet radiating an inner light that pulsed with an alien rhythm. It descended, not with the roar of engines, but with a soundless grace, hovering over a nearby field. I was frozen, my foot instinctively hitting the brake, my eyes locked onto the spectacle unfolding before me. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, a siren call in the desolate night. Hypnotized. That's the only word that captures the feeling. Drawn in against my will, by something utterly beyond my comprehension. The craft seemed to hum, a vibration that resonated deep within my bones, and the world around me began to blur, to fade. Then nothing. A void. A terrifying blank space in time. Days later, the fragments started to surface, chilling images of tall, gaunt figures, eyes like black mirrors reflecting an unknown cosmos, and the strange, inexplicable marks that materialized on my skin. But the most unsettling echo was the realization that I wasn't alone that night, that others had witnessed the same impossible event. What had we all seen? What had been done to us in that stolen time? The year 1993 was a different era, a time before the internet saturated every facet of life. News traveled slower, information was more localized, and the vast expanse of the Australian outback felt even more remote, more isolated from the bustling coastal cities. In this landscape of red earth and ancient skies, everyday lives unfolded with a rhythm dictated by the sun and the seasons. For me, Kelly Cahill, life was ordinary, grounded in the familiar routines of work and family. I was a wife, a mother, navigating the everyday challenges of raising a family in a small community, finding comfort in the predictable cadence of life. My world was one of suburban normalcy, school runs, grocery shopping, and weekend barbecues. There was nothing extraordinary about me, nothing to suggest I would become entangled in an event that defied all conventional understanding. I was practical, down to earth, a woman who trusted in what she could see and touch. The idea of spaceships and aliens belonged firmly in the realm of fiction, of late-night movies and imaginative books, not in the reality of my quiet, suburban existence. But the outback holds secrets in its silence, whispers carried on the wind across endless plains. And in 1993, those whispers began to coalesce into something tangible, something terrifyingly real. It wasn't just my experience alone. That night, others saw it too. Strangers, driving along different stretches of highway, miles apart, yet witnessing the same impossible object in the sky. This shared element, this collective witnessing, added a layer of chilling validity to the unbelievable. Our initial motivations were simple, human, to understand, to explain the inexplicable. to reconcile the rational world we knew with the irrational event we had experienced. Driven by confusion, fear, and a desperate need for answers, we started down a path that would lead us into a labyrinth of disbelief, ridicule, and the unnerving realization that our reality was far more fragile and far stranger than we could ever have imagined. We were ordinary people thrust into an extraordinary, terrifying history, unknowingly becoming unwilling participants in a narrative that stretched far beyond the boundaries of our small, familiar world. The marks weren't just surface level. Scans showed anomalies beneath my skin, metallic fragments, impossibly placed. The other witnesses, contacted through hushed channels, reported similar findings, shared fragmented memories of invasive procedures, and whispered of government agents, silencing anyone who spoke too loudly. Our ordinary lives shattered. We were caught in a web of cosmic horror and earthly conspiracy. Our immediate goal became clear: to understand what had happened to us that night, to make sense of the fragmented, terrifying memories that haunted our waking hours. The first obstacle was the wall of disbelief we encountered. Doctors offered no explanation for the marks, dismissing them as self-inflicted or dermatological anomalies. Family and friends, while concerned for our well-being, struggled to accept the outlandish nature of our claims, gently suggesting stress or overactive imaginations. The very idea of alien abduction was met with polite skepticism or outright ridicule. This external disbelief forced us inwards, seeking solace and validation in each other. We, the witnesses, began to connect, cautiously at first, through anonymous channels, sharing our stories, our fears, our physical findings. A strange, uneasy camaraderie formed, born out of shared trauma and a desperate need to be believed. We were strangers bound by an impossible experience, a secret society of the unwilling. Within this fragile group dynamic, subplots began to emerge. One witness, a former military man, believed the government was involved, actively suppressing information and discrediting witnesses. He started his own quiet investigation, pulling at threads of secrecy, uncovering whispers of past unexplained events. Another, a deeply religious woman, struggled to reconcile the abduction with her faith, questioning her beliefs, her very understanding of God and creation. For me, the subplot was more personal, more insidious, the creeping fear that my own mind was betraying me, that I was losing my grip on reality, and the devastating impact this was having on my family, who watched helplessly as I became increasingly withdrawn and haunted. The initial goal of understanding was quickly morphing into a desperate fight for survival, not just against external forces, but against the internal disintegration of our own sanity and our place in a world that suddenly felt profoundly unsafe and unknowable. The inciting incident arrived not as a flashing light in the sky, but as a creeping dread within my own body. The triangular marks, initially faint and easily dismissed, began to throb, radiating a deep, internal heat. Sleep offered no respite. Nightmares intensified, no longer just fragmented images, but vivid, visceral replays of the abduction, leaving me gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat. During one terrifying episode, I woke to find the marks inflamed, raised, and weeping a strange, luminescent fluid. Panic surged. This was no longer just psychological. Something was physically happening to me, and the dismissive doctors offered no answers, only vague pronouncements about stress and autoimmune responses. My health deteriorated rapidly, fatigue overwhelming me, sharp pains shooting through my body. I felt like I was being consumed from within, my body reacting to something alien, something implanted, something wrong. The urgency became visceral, a desperate fight for my own physical well-being. Simultaneously, our small group of witnesses was shaken by a different kind of alarm. The former military man, David, contacted us with chilling news. His quiet inquiries had yielded concrete evidence, surveillance. Phone taps, unmarked cars following us, hushed whispers overheard in public places. We were being watched. Not just dismissed, but actively monitored, possibly controlled. This revelation shifted the conflict from internal struggle to external threat. We were not just grappling with our memories, but with a tangible, earthly power that seemed determined to keep us silent. The inciting incident was twofold: my deteriorating health, a direct consequence of the abduction, and the chilling confirmation of government surveillance, revealing the stakes were far higher than we initially understood. We were not just victims of an alien encounter, we were caught in a game with unknown players and terrifying rules. The immediate consequence of the escalating physical symptoms was terror. Every ache, every flicker of pain, became a confirmation of the alien intrusion, a constant, agonizing reminder of the violation. Sleep became a battle against nightmares, and waking hours were consumed by a gnawing fear of what was happening inside my own body. The doctors, still dismissive, offered increasingly invasive and futile tests, compounding the sense of violation and helplessness. My motivation shifted from simply understanding to desperately surviving, to finding any means to alleviate the physical torment that was consuming me. The revelation of surveillance brought a different kind of terror, a chilling awareness of unseen eyes, unheard ears. Paranoia became a constant companion. Every unfamiliar car, every lingering glance, felt like confirmation that we were being watched, controlled. Trust eroded, not just in institutions, but in each other. Could we be sure our phones weren't tapped, our homes bugged? The once fragile camaraderie of the witnesses became strained with suspicion and fear. Our goal of uncovering the truth was now overshadowed by the immediate need for self-preservation, to evade those who seemed determined to silence us. Into this atmosphere of mounting fear and paranoia, a new figure emerged. A local journalist, Sarah, known for her investigative work on sensitive community issues, contacted David, the former military man. Intrigued by the rumors circulating about unexplained events and government interest, Sarah approached cautiously, offering a potential avenue for wider exposure, a chance to break through the wall of official denial. Her motivation was journalistic integrity, a desire to uncover the truth, regardless of how outlandish it might seem. But her arrival introduced a new layer of complexity. Could we trust her? Was she genuinely an ally, or another pawn in a larger game? Her presence offered a flicker of hope, but also amplified the risks, raising the stakes in our desperate fight for answers and survival. The stakes ratcheted up when David's apartment was ransacked, not robbed, but meticulously searched, electronic devices gone, files scattered. The message was clear. They knew we were investigating, and they wouldn't hesitate to escalate. This act of intimidation fractured the fragile trust within our group. Paranoia blossomed, suspicion turning inwards as we each questioned who might be compromised, who could be feeding information to them. Sarah, the journalist, became a focal point of this tension. While her offer of media exposure was tempting, promising to shatter the silence, it also felt like a dangerous gamble. Could we trust her ambition? Was she truly working for the truth, or was she being manipulated, knowingly or unknowingly, by the very forces we were trying to expose? For me, the dilemma was agonizing, desperate for help as my health spiraled, yet terrified of further exposure, further violation. David, driven by a sense of responsibility, pushed forward with his investigation, despite the risks, convinced that uncovering the truth was the only way to protect us all, even as his actions put us all in greater danger. The first major turning point arrived with David's discovery. Sifting through fragmented data recovered from his ransacked apartment's hard drive, he unearthed a coded document hinting at a clandestine government project, codenamed Nightingale, seemingly focused on extraterrestrial encounters and, chillingly, human subjects. The document was incomplete, cryptic, but undeniably linked to our experiences, confirming our deepest fears. This wasn't just about silence, it was about active manipulation and control. Simultaneously, my health reached a critical point. The pain became unbearable, the internal heat intensifying, culminating in a terrifying seizure, leaving me weak and disoriented, the metallic marks pulsing with an ominous glow. Faced with these converging crises, David's dangerous discovery and my rapidly deteriorating health, a desperate decision had to be made. Sarah, sensing the urgency, presented a risky proposition: full public disclosure. She had contacts, a platform, and a burning desire to expose the truth. But going public meant relinquishing any semblance of control, inviting further scrutiny, and potentially provoking a hostile reaction from those we sought to expose. It was a gamble, a leap of faith into the blinding light of public attention, but with my body failing and the walls closing in, it felt like our only desperate chance, a final roll of the dice in a game where the stakes were our sanity, our health, and perhaps even our lives. The decision to go public was a point of no return. Before Sarah could finalize the story, we faced immediate, subtle pushback. My husband, initially supportive, began exhibiting a strange detachment, his reassurances feeling hollow, his eyes holding a flicker of something unreadable. Was it fear, or something more calculated? The unease grew, a creeping suspicion that mirrored the paranoia gripping our group, forcing me to question even those closest to me. David, meanwhile, encountered a different kind of resistance. His attempts to verify information from the coded document led to dead ends, abruptly disconnected phone lines, and a chilling encounter with unmarked men who subtly warned him to drop his inquiries for his own safety. These minor confrontations served as stark reminders of the forces arrayed against us, solidifying the danger of our chosen path. A minor plot resolution emerged unexpectedly when another witness, Maria, who had remained largely silent due to fear, contacted us with a crucial piece of information. Driven by guilt and the escalating threats, she revealed she had managed to discreetly photograph a symbol she'd seen within the craft during her abduction. This symbol, unlike anything we recognized, became a tangible piece of evidence, a potential key to unlocking further understanding, and a small victory against the overwhelming feeling of helplessness. It also forged a new, tentative alliance between Maria and the rest of the group, reinforcing the power of shared experience in the face of adversity. But this small victory was overshadowed by the growing sense of impending crisis, the knowledge that by preparing to reveal the truth, we were stepping onto a battlefield where the consequences could be catastrophic. Final tensions escalated to a breaking point. Just days before Sarah was set to publish the story, my symptoms intensified dramatically. The pain became agonizing, relentless, and I started experiencing terrifying blackouts, moments of lost time even outside of sleep, blurring the line between reality and the alien abduction. Fear morphed into a desperate race against time, not just to expose the truth, but to survive whatever was happening within my own body. This personal crisis became the ultimate obstacle, forcing me to confront my own mortality while simultaneously preparing for the public storm about to break. For David, the final challenge manifested as a direct threat. He received an anonymous, untraceable phone call, chillingly specific about his family, their routines, their vulnerability. The message was clear: silence Sarah, stop the story, or face devastating consequences. This emotionally charged threat forced David into an agonizing dilemma: protect his family by abandoning the fight for truth, or risk everything for the greater cause, potentially sacrificing those he loved most. His subplot of government conspiracy investigation now directly intersected with the personal stakes of his family's safety. Sarah, feeling the pressure from all sides, faced her own final hurdle. Her editor, initially enthusiastic about the story, suddenly became hesitant, citing legal concerns and lack of concrete evidence, clearly influenced by external pressure. This professional challenge tested Sarah's resolve, forcing her to decide if she was willing to risk her career, her reputation, and potentially even her safety, to publish a story that the established powers desperately wanted to suppress. All narrative threads were now taut, strained to their limits, converging on the precipice of public exposure, the imminent climax promising either revelation or devastating collapse. Sarah hit publish. The internet ignited. Sarah's article, raw and unflinching, went viral within hours. Initial official denials crumbled under the weight of public outcry, fueled by Maria's photograph of the alien symbol, leaked fragments of David's Nightingale document, and our collective amplified voices. My physical torment reached its zenith just before the story broke. Then, a bizarre shift. As the truth began to surface, the pain lessened, The marks faded slightly, a perplexing correlation hinting at a connection beyond our comprehension, perhaps even intentional. David, bracing for the promised reprisal, found an unexpected shield in the public glare. The anonymity of the threat evaporated under media scrutiny, offering a fragile, tense reprieve. His family remained on edge, but the shadows receded, replaced by the harsh light of public awareness. Sarah, facing professional condemnation from some quarters, found herself unexpectedly lauded by others, a pariah in the old guard, a hero to a new generation demanding transparency. Her career trajectory was uncertain, but her purpose was solidified, her voice amplified. The climax wasn't a decisive victory, not a neat resolution. It was an exposure, a crack in the wall of silence, a defiant shout into the darkness. The government machinery undoubtedly would regroup, adapt, continue to operate in the shadows. But the seed of doubt had been sown, the conversation had begun. Our lives remained irrevocably altered, marked by fear and uncertainty, yet also infused with a strange sense of purpose, of resilience forged in the face of the impossible. The fight for truth, for understanding, was far from over. Listen to the voices that official narratives try to silence. Question everything. The truth is out there, waiting to be heard. In the aftermath, life was irrevocably altered, etched with the indelible mark of the unknown. For me, Kelly, the physical symptoms receded, a fragile truce declared within my own body, but the internal landscape remained transformed. Fear lingered, yes, but intertwined with a newfound sense of resilience, a quiet understanding that the ordinary world held unseen depths of extraordinary and terrifying possibilities. David, forever vigilant, became an unlikely advocate, a voice for others silenced by fear, his life dedicated to uncovering further fragments of the hidden truth. Sarah, riding the wave of controversy, continued to champion marginalized voices, her journalism now imbued with a fierce commitment to exposing uncomfortable realities. We were each changed, forged in the crucible of shared trauma, our paths diverging yet forever connected by the invisible threads of that shared, impossible night. The epilogue isn't a fairy tale ending. The government's Nightingale project remained shrouded in secrecy, the full extent of the alien presence, their motives, their intentions, agonizingly unclear. Closure, in its truest sense, remained elusive. But we found a different kind of resolution, a personal acceptance of the unexplainable, a defiant refusal to be silenced. We learned that truth, however terrifying, has a power of its own, that even in the face of overwhelming forces, the courage to speak, to question, to seek understanding, is a victory in itself. Never stop looking up at the stars. Dare to ask the uncomfortable questions. Your truth, however unbelievable, might just be the key to unlocking a reality far stranger and far more profound than you ever imagined.
If you're enjoying this and want to support the channel in bringing more chilling stories like this, any contribution is greatly appreciated. The donation link is just below this video. It's safe, easy, and fast. No registration required. Even the smallest support means so much. Thank you for joining me on this journey.
Third story, Meng Xiaoguo's case, 1994, China. The year was 1994. Deep within the sprawling Changbai Mountains of Heilongjiang, China, life moved with the rhythm of the seasons. For me, Meng Xiaoguo, it was a life carved from the forest itself. Days were spent felling timber, nights in the quiet embrace of my small village. We were simple folk, bound to the land, our world defined by the towering pines and the whisper of the wind through their needles. Superstition lingered in the shadows, whispers of ancient spirits, but our reality was grounded in the tangible, the predictable. Then, the sky began to weep light. At first, it was just talk, hushed whispers among the forestry workers of strange glows dancing on the horizon. Dismissed as tricks of the mountain air, or perhaps stray reflections, they were easily ignored. But the lights persisted, growing bolder, more insistent, defying easy explanations. A disquiet began to settle, a prickling unease that the familiar world was shifting, cracking under a pressure we couldn't name. Our predictable rhythms faltered, replaced by a nervous watchfulness, a constant scanning of the twilight sky. It started with the lights, but it was never just about lights. It was about the feeling that something was watching, a presence unseen, a knowing silence that permeated the mountain air. Sleep became a restless affair, dreams tinged with an unnatural luminescence, a chilling premonition of something encroaching. The forest, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a watchful sentinel, holding secrets in its shadowed depths, secrets that were beginning to bleed into our waking world. And then one night, the light came for me. It wasn't a distant flicker anymore. It was a presence, solid and terrifying, an encounter that shattered the fragile peace of our mountain life, leaving me adrift in a reality I no longer understood. When I woke, everything had changed, stained with an alien touch, marked by a memory that chills me to the bone. They promised me a child, a bridge between worlds. But all I'm left with is the echoing question, where is he? Nestled within the vast, ancient embrace of the Changbai Mountains, Hongguang Forestry Farm in 1994 China was a world unto itself. Life here was dictated by the land, a rugged existence of hard labor and simple pleasures. Homes were modest wooden structures, huddled together against the long, harsh winters. Technology was a distant whisper, the outside world a hazy concept. For generations, families like mine had drawn their sustenance and identity from these forests, felling timber under the watchful gaze of the silent peaks. Our culture was a rich tapestry woven with practicality and folklore, where ancient superstitions coexisted with the modernizing ideals of a changing China. I, Meng Zhaogua, was a product of this world. My hands were calloused from years of working the forest, my spirit grounded in the rhythms of nature. I found solace in the quiet strength of the mountains, in the honest sweat of my labor, in the familiar routines of village life. My world revolved around Li Hua, my wife, a woman whose resilience mirrored the enduring strength of the land itself. We shared a deep, unspoken understanding, a love forged in shared hardship and quiet moments of joy. Our dreams were simple, a family, a comfortable home, a continuation of the life we knew. Li Hua was more than just my wife. She was my anchor, my confidant, a woman whose intuition was as sharp as any mountain hawk's eye. She possessed a quiet wisdom, a deep connection to the unseen currents of our world. While I was often pragmatic, focused on the tangible, she sensed the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, the unspoken anxieties that rippled through our community. Her strength was not in brute force, but in unwavering empathy and an unyielding spirit. Our initial motivations were rooted in this simple life: to provide for each other, to contribute to our community, to find contentment within the familiar embrace of our mountains. We sought stability, predictability, a life undisturbed by the outside world. But the arrival of the lights shattered this fragile peace, challenging the very foundations of our reality. The strange occurrences pulled us from our comfortable routines, forcing us to confront a terrifying unknown, igniting a new, desperate motivation: to understand, to survive, and to protect the life we held dear from the encroaching darkness. The lights weren't random, they sought me. Whispers became screams as livestock vanished, shadows moved in daylight. Then, the mark appeared on my leg, pulsing with alien heat. Li Hua saw it, her eyes widening with dawning horror. They weren't just watching, they were changing us. The forestry farm wasn't just a workplace anymore, it was a hunting ground. Our primary goal became clear: survival and understanding. The mark on my leg throbbed, a constant reminder that whatever had happened in the forest was not a dream. We needed answers, but where could we even begin to look? The world we knew offered no explanation for pale-skinned women and promises of hybrid children. Our first obstacle was the silence, the vast, unknowable silence of the cosmos that had intruded into our lives. Fear became a constant companion. We were isolated, not just geographically in our remote village, but emotionally. How could we explain this to anyone? Who would believe us? The village, already on edge from the strange lights, was now simmering with paranoia. Whispers followed us, glances lingered, doubt hung heavy in the air. Trust, once the bedrock of our community, began to erode, replaced by suspicion and fear of the unknown. Our second obstacle was the very community we belonged to, their disbelief a barrier as impenetrable as the mountains themselves. Li Hua, ever resourceful, urged caution. "We must observe," she insisted, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Understand their patterns, if they have any. We need to know what they want." Her pragmatic approach grounded me, gave me a sliver of control in a situation spiraling into chaos. Our dynamic shifted. Fear drew us closer, our reliance on each other deepening. We became partners in this terrifying investigation, our love a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness. A subplot emerged from the escalating fear in Hongguang Forestry Farm. Others were seeing things, experiencing unsettling events, though none as directly as me. Livestock vanished, strange symbols were found carved into trees, and some villagers claimed to have seen figures moving in the shadows, just beyond the edge of the lamplight. The village elder, a man steeped in ancient lore, spoke of celestial omens and restless spirits, adding fuel to the fire of fear and superstition. The social fabric of our community was fraying, threatened not just by the aliens, but by the fear and division they sowed amongst us. The turning point arrived not in the sky, but in our home. One frigid dawn, Li Hua didn't wake. Not in the way of normal sleep, but a stillness that chilled me deeper than the mountain air. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow, almost imperceptible. Fear, raw and immediate, clamped around my heart. This wasn't illness, this was something else. The mark on my leg pulsed in sympathetic rhythm with the frantic beat of my own heart. Panic clawed at me, but Li Hua's earlier words echoed in my mind. Observe. Understand. Rushing for help was useless. Who could help with something so unnatural? Instead, I examined her, searching for any sign, any clue. Her pulse was weak, her eyes remained closed, but there were no visible injuries, no fever. Just a profound, unsettling stillness, as if her very life force was being drained away. My gaze fell upon her wrist, and there it was, a faint, almost invisible mark, identical to mine, shimmering faintly beneath her skin. Rage mixed with terror. They had touched her too. They were escalating, no longer content with observation, with subtle manipulation. This was a direct attack, a violation of our sanctuary, a threat to the one person I held most dear. The quiet dread that had been simmering now boiled over into a desperate resolve. I couldn't just observe anymore, I had to act. My goal shifted from understanding to protection, from survival to defiance. The forest was no longer just a workplace or a source of fear, it was now a battleground. I would understand them, yes, but not as a passive observer. I would confront them, for Li Hua, for our life, for the fragile hope of reclaiming our world from their silent invasion. This stillness, this theft of life, was the line they had crossed. Li Hua's stillness became the suffocating silence of our world. Every breath she didn't take was a hammer blow against my resolve. My motivation was no longer abstract understanding. It was visceral, primal, to bring her back. But how do you fight an enemy you can't see, understand, or even touch? The immediate consequence was agonizing helplessness. Our small house, once a sanctuary, transformed into a prison, confining me with my fear and Li Hua's fading life. The challenge now was not just facing the aliens, but facing the crushing weight of the unknown, the gnawing despair that threatened to paralyze me. Isolation intensified. Turning to the village was no longer an option. Their fear had curdled into suspicion. My story of lights and marks would be met with ridicule or worse, fear-driven accusations. We were alone, adrift in a sea of cosmic dread and earthly disbelief. A new challenge emerged, to find answers, to find help without revealing ourselves, without becoming pariahs in our own community. Deeper within the forestry farm, old man Chen, a recluse who lived at the edge of the woods and was rumored to possess ancient knowledge, became a flicker of hope. Villagers whispered he understood the old ways, the spirits of the mountains. Could he understand this? A subplot began to form, a desperate gamble to seek help from the fringes of our society, from the very folklore we had previously dismissed. Perhaps the answers weren't in science or reason, but in the forgotten wisdom of the mountains themselves. The forest itself seemed to respond to Li Hua's condition, growing darker, more oppressive. The familiar paths twisted into menacing labyrinths, shadows deepened, whispering secrets in the rustling leaves. The setting became an active participant, a reflection of our internal turmoil, hinting that the answers, or perhaps more dangers, lay hidden within its ancient depths. My motivation solidified. I would venture into the heart of that darkness, face whatever waited there, if it meant bringing Li Hua back to me. Li Hua's breath grew fainter, each shallow inhale a chilling countdown. My desperation intensified, morphing into a reckless urgency. Going to Old Man Chen was a gamble. Whispered tales painted him as touched by the mountains, maybe even mad. But conventional help was useless, and time was bleeding away with Li Hua's life force. The stakes weren't just about understanding the aliens anymore. They were about life and death, about losing the only light in my darkening world. The village's fear transformed into open hostility. My increasingly frantic actions to save Li Hua, my secretive trips towards Old Man Chen's isolated dwelling, fueled their suspicion. Whispers turned to accusations, fear of the unknown now directed at me, the marked man, the one who brought this darkness upon them. The subplot of community fear became directly intertwined with my personal quest, adding another layer of danger. Seeking help from the village was no longer just improbable, it was actively dangerous. Reaching Old Man Chen, I found a man as enigmatic as the mountains themselves. His eyes, though ancient, held a piercing knowingness. He spoke in riddles of star children and ancient pacts, of energies unseen and forces best left undisturbed. His words were cryptic, unsettling, offering glimpses of understanding, but shrouded in folklore and unsettling pronouncements. Was he truly wise or simply delusional? My dilemma deepened. Was this the answer, or just another descent into the unknown, possibly leading me further astray while Li Hua faded? Trusting him was a terrifying leap of faith. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, the very air thick with anticipation. The familiar rustling of leaves became whispers, the shadows deepened into menacing shapes. Nature mirrored the escalating tension, reflecting the high stakes and the increasingly perilous path I was choosing. Each rustle, each shadow, felt like a warning, a sign that I was treading on dangerous ground, both earthly and otherworldly. The intertwined threads of personal desperation, community suspicion, and cryptic folklore tightened, pulling me towards a terrifying and uncertain climax. Old Man Chen's riddles, initially baffling, began to coalesce into a terrifyingly coherent picture. He spoke of a celestial bargain made long ago, of beings who harvested life force and marks as conduits. He revealed a ritual, a dangerous countermeasure rooted in ancient mountain lore, a way to sever the alien connection, but it required a terrifying sacrifice, a direct confrontation at the heart of their presence. This was the turning point. No more observation, no more seeking understanding from the shadows. Action, direct and perilous, was the only path to save Li Hua. Fear warred with resolve within me. The ritual was shrouded in uncertainty, success far from guaranteed, failure meaning not just Li Hua's death, but potentially my own. Yet, seeing Li Hua's life flickering like a dying ember, I knew I had no choice. This desperation ignited a fierce determination I hadn't known I possessed. I was no longer just a forestry worker, a husband. I was a protector, ready to face the cosmic unknown for the woman I loved. This transformation, forged in fear and desperation, prepared me for the final, terrifying confrontation, the climax where everything would be decided, for Li Hua, for myself, and perhaps for our world. Armed with Old Man Chen's cryptic ritual, preparation became a frantic race against time. Gathering the necessary components, rare mountain herbs, specific stones from the riverbed, and a personal item of immense emotional value, was a challenge in itself. Each step of the ritual felt shrouded in ancient power, a dangerous dance with forces I barely understood. The village, fueled by fear and misunderstanding, became a hostile entity. Whispers turned into open confrontations. Some, swayed by Old Man Chen's unsettling pronouncements about star demons, saw me as a dangerous link to the encroaching darkness, a threat to be neutralized. Unexpectedly, a small faction emerged, villagers who, despite their fear, recognized my desperation and Li Hua's plight. A fragile alliance formed, offering clandestine help, a flicker of human solidarity in the face of the alien unknown. This unexpected support offered a sliver of hope, but also a new layer of risk, betrayal from within our own community. A minor confrontation arose when villagers, panicked by increasingly bold displays of the lights in the sky, attempted to prevent me from venturing into the forest for the ritual. This became a brief but tense standoff, resolved only by the intervention of my newfound allies, who vouched for my intentions and diverted the mob's fear-driven aggression. This incident resolved the immediate threat from the villagers, temporarily, but foreshadowed a potentially larger conflict should the ritual fail and their fear escalate further. Old Man Chun, observing from the periphery, offered cryptic warnings. The forest remembers, the mountains listen. Your actions will have echoes beyond this night. His words hinted at far-reaching consequences, suggesting that the ritual, regardless of its outcome, would irrevocably alter our relationship with the mountains, with the unseen forces at play, and perhaps even with the aliens themselves. As darkness fell, the lights in the sky pulsed with an almost sentient anticipation. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the forest holding its breath. Everything was set. The stage was prepared for the climax, for the confrontation that would determine Li Hua's fate, and perhaps the fate of Hongguang Forestry Farm itself. The minor resolutions, the fragile alliances, the subtle foreshadowing all converged, pointing towards a major resolution or a devastating defeat in the heart of the encroaching darkness. Darkness descended, thick and suffocating, mirroring the dread that consumed me. Li Hua's breaths were now mere whispers against my ear, each one a painful reminder of the dwindling time. The final obstacle was the ritual site itself, deep within the forbidden heart of the forest, a place whispered to be a nexus of unseen energies, now undoubtedly watched by them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, felt like the approach of unseen eyes, the tightening grip of their alien presence. Fear was a physical weight, threatening to buckle my knees, to shatter my resolve before I even began. Doubt gnawed at me. Was Old Man Chen's folklore just that, tales for children? Could this ancient ritual truly stand against beings capable of such unimaginable power? The emotionally charged stakes were almost unbearable. Failure meant not only losing Li Hua, but facing the crushing guilt of having failed her, of leading us both to utter destruction. The fragile alliance with the villagers felt like a distant memory, swallowed by the oppressive fear that now choked Hongguang Forestry Farm. We were truly alone, facing a cosmic horror with nothing but ancient whispers and desperate hope. All narrative threads tightened, converging on this single, terrifying point. The village's fear, the alien lights pulsing ominously overhead, Old Man Chen's cryptic pronouncements echoing in my mind, and above all, Li Hua's fading life, all focused on this final night, this desperate ritual. The air crackled with anticipation, a silent countdown to a climax that promised either salvation or utter devastation. The final tensions were stretched taut, the last challenges poised to test me beyond my limits, ensuring that everything, all hope and all fear, would be unleashed in the heart of the forest, under the cold, watchful gaze of the alien stars. The ritual began under the malevolent glare of the alien lights. At the heart of the forbidden forest, surrounded by ancient symbols drawn in mountain soil and the pungent smoke of burning herbs, I began the incantation Old Man Chen had taught me, my voice trembling but firm. The air crackled, the forest seemed to recoil, and then they arrived. Not physically, but as a crushing psychic presence, a wave of cold alien intelligence attempting to shatter my focus, to extinguish the fragile flame of the ritual. This was the confrontation, not of weapons, but of wills, of human desperation against cosmic indifference. Fueled by the image of Li Hua's still face, I pushed back, channeling every ounce of my love, my rage, my will into the ancient words. The mark on my leg burned, a conduit of their power, but also now a focal point of my resistance. The forest itself seemed to respond, the wind rising, the trees swaying, joining my defiance against the invaders. A blinding flash erupted from the ritual site, a surge of energy that ripped through the alien presence, severing the connection, pushing back the darkness. Then silence. An earthly silence, the oppressive alien hum gone, replaced by the familiar sounds of the night forest. I rushed back to Li Hua, heart pounding, fear still clinging to me. She was still still, but as I touched her hand, a faint warmth returned. A shallow breath, then another, deeper now, steadier. The ritual had worked. Li Hua was returning. The immediate conflict was resolved, but the larger questions lingered, unanswered in the starlit silence. The lights never returned to Hongguang Forestry Farm with such menacing intensity, but the memory, the fear, the question of where, it all remained. Had we truly driven them away, or merely pushed them back into the shadows? The subplots of village fear and whispers faded, replaced by a cautious quiet, a community forever marked by the unknown. But the biggest question, the core of my horror, echoed still. They promised a child, a hybrid. Where is he? Has anyone else experienced something beyond explanation? Share your stories in the comments below. Perhaps, in sharing our fears, we can find a different kind of strength, a human strength against the vast, unknowable universe. Li Hua lived. Slowly, painstakingly, she returned to me, to herself. The silence in our home receded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of our shared breaths once more. But the forest, the mountains, they held a different kind of silence now, a watchful quiet. I was no longer just Meng Zhaogua, forestry worker. I was Meng Zhaogua, who had looked into the abyss and wrestled something back. Fear remained, a constant companion, but it was tempered with a hard-won understanding. Even against cosmic terrors, human love, human will could fight back. Life in Hongguang Forestry Farm resumed, outwardly normal, yet subtly changed. The lights became a hushed memory, a shared trauma that bound us together even as it kept us apart. We rebuilt our lives, Li Hua and I, closer now, our love deepened by the fire we had walked through. But the question lingered, a cold knot in my gut, a whisper in the lonely hours. Asterisk, where is he? The hybrid child, the promise, the violation, unresolved, unanswered, a future hanging over us like the ever-present mountains. What happens to a promise made in the face of the unknown? Does it vanish with the lights? Or does it echo, silently, persistently across the years? Perhaps true closure isn't in answers, but in the strength we find in asking the questions, in facing the darkness together. Tell me, have you ever felt watched by something unseen? Share your reflections. Let's find solace in our shared humanity, even in the face of the vast, unsettling mystery of it all.
So, what did you think of this story? Did it scare you? Was there a part that gave you chills or stuck with you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you've had a similar experience or have suggestions for improving future videos, let me know too. Thank you for watching and being part of this amazing community. See you in the next story.